Hey guys, today I want to talk about one of the most famous mythical stones of all time, the Philosopher Stone. Now, the idea of a mythical substance that can turn metal into gold has been around for centuries, to the point where it's become canonized in pop culture. Let's talk a little bit about the history of the Philosopher's Stone, as well as some of my favorite uses of it in entertainment. And if you stick around, I'll show you some real-life alchemy. Let's start at the beginning. The earliest mention of a Philosopher's Stone type thing is from 300 AD in a work called Meta by a Greek alchemist named Zosimos of Panopolis. However, some alchemical writers claim that its origins go back even further, like biblically. These writers claim the knowledge of the stone was given to Adam by God himself. This knowledge was passed down through biblical patriarchs, which is supposedly why they lived for hundreds of years. The theoretical origins of the stone can be traced back to ancient Greek philosophers, hence the name Philosopher's Stone. The idea of the stone was formed around the concept prima materia, which is the first matter or prime matter. Prima materia, also called ether or quintessence, was thought to be the fifth element, the origin of the elements, and the starting ingredient of the Philosopher's Stone. The search for prima materia was at the core of alchemical study, and as such, it went by many, many names. World soul, chaos, vinegar, boiling milk, spiritual blood, permanent water, spittle of the moon, and dung. Despite it being practically unobtainable, alchemists seem to have a pretty good idea of the properties of this Philosopher's Stone. Most famously, it was said to be able to turn base metals like lead and copper into silver and gold. It could also turn regular old stones into precious ones. It was also thought to heal all illness and prolong one's life by drinking a tiny bit of it with wine. Maybe it was just the wine. You could also use it to fuel perpetually burning lamps, revive dead plants, make flexible glass, and even create clones and little homunculi. It was a real Swiss Army stone. Now, I know a lot of this sounds ridiculous and it makes alchemists look like mad scientists, but in reality, that's pretty far from the truth. Isaac Newton, formulator of the laws of motion and gravity, developer of calculus, and a pioneer of optic science, alchemist. Robert Boyle, the first modern chemist and developer of the scientific method, boom, alchemist. Really, we have a lot to thank alchemists for as far as developing scientific techniques, medicines, and even pigments. They never quite fulfilled their magnum opus, but hey, it's about the journey, not the destination, am I right? Anyways, all of this historical attention and focus around such a mythical and powerful stone make it stand out as a potential plot device for fiction. For example, let's take a look at the very popular anime and manga series, Full Metal Alchemist. In this series, alchemy is not magic like it's often portrayed, but rather a legitimate science. The characters can transmute elements from one to the other using the flow of natural energies, and instead use a Philosopher's Stone to enhance their pre-existing alchemical abilities. Remember how I referred to the Philosopher's Stone as World Soul earlier? Well, this show seems to have taken that to heart, because their stones are made from souls. Lots and lots of souls. The creation process of a Philosopher's Stone isn't explicitly detailed, but it does involve trapping a soul in a transmutation circle, and when you use the stone, souls are consumed. You run out of souls, and you run out of stone. Also, unlike our traditional Philosopher's Stone, which is typically red, and, well, stony, a Philosopher's Stone in the manga can look like a number of things. It can be lumpy like coal, a thick liquid known as the Grand Elixir, or even a man like Van Hohenheim. In the 2003 anime, he and his wife Dante used the stone to transfer their souls from body to body, living a kind of immortality. Maybe that's how they did it in the Bible. Maybe not. Let's move on to a slightly older medium than anime, Western comic books. For this one, we're digging deep into the DC Comics archives, way back to a time when Joe DiMaggio promoted Wheaties, the breakfast of champions, and kids ran around with actual propeller beanies on their heads. It was a simpler time. I digress. All-Star Comics Volume 1, Issue 42 features the Justice Society of America having a run-in with Professor Zobar Zodiac, aka the Alchemist. It's set around 1942-ish, and both parties are very interested in finding the four wonders of alchemy: the elixir of youth, the universal solvent, the secret of perpetual motion, and of course, the Philosopher's Stone. Using his alchemical newspaper scanner to peruse 100 newspapers at a time, Zodiac easily locates the Philosopher's Stone. But the Flash and Hawkman are there to protect it. Zodiac gets his hands on the stone and, using his mind sharpened by alchemy, he applies the stone to a steel support structure. The whole thing turns to gold and collapses on top of the fastest man alive and a guy who can literally fly. As goofy as that sounds, it might be the most realistic part of the whole comic. Gold is a very soft metal and is not load-bearing whatsoever, so the fact that the structure immediately collapses is pretty true to life. If you see a building or structure that appears gold, it's most likely gold leaf and not solid gold. Plus, gold is extremely dense and heavy, meaning that the larger your structure is, the more difficult it will be to support its own weight. The Alchemist, as he has dubbed himself at this point, goes on to use his alchemo bombs to turn Wonder Woman and Black Canary into children. He also uses the universal solvent and a pair of well-aimed champagne corks to subdue the Atom and Dr. Midnight. Lastly, he takes out Green Lantern by alchemo bombing the beam from his power ring, turning it into a solid. He then breaks it off like a Kit Kat bar and bonks him on the head with it. Where did they find these superheroes in the 40s, man? Despite being comically dispatched, the good guys eventually beat the alchemist, who attempts to fly away in a plane built according to the principles of alchemy. Apparently, alchemy can create gold, but it cannot create lift. As Green Lantern put it, alchemy is black magic after all, and nothing can take the place of science. But then, how did Professor Zopar Zodiac pull all those feats off? I believe the Flash may have the answer to that question. He supposes that the Philosopher's Stone must have been so radioactive that it changed the atomic structure of whatever it came in contact with. And I'd say that's not too far off the mark. Remember when I mentioned real-life alchemy? Back in 1901, scientists Frederick Soddy and Ernest Rutherford observed an element, thorium, becoming radium. This was not black magic, but rather a natural process called radioactive decay, wherein an unstable atomic nucleus loses energy over time by radiation. But these guys didn't know that. Soddy shouted out, "Rutherford, this is transmutation!" To which Rutherford replied, "Soddy, don't call it transmutation, they'll have our heads off as alchemists." In 1925, artificial transmutation was achieved by firing alpha particles at nitrogen atoms, turning them into oxygen. Later, in the 1980s, scientists finally turned lead into gold. Well, kind of. They didn't start with lead, but rather with bismuth, which is adjacent to lead on the periodic table and would also be simpler to use than lead would be. The team of scientists accelerated beams of carbon and neon nuclei to almost the speed of light, and then blasted them into thin bismuth foil. The collision removed 4 protons from some of the bismuth atoms, making them gold. There were too few gold atoms to even be measured with a mass spectrometer, but hey, they did it. So why don't we just turn bismuth into gold all day long? Well, according to a lead scientist on that team, the beam cost about $5,000 an hour to run, and they used it all day and produced only a handful of gold atoms. By his calculations, a single ounce of gold produced by playing atomic bumper cars cost about $4 quadrillion. The cost of an ounce of gold at the time? About 560 bucks. Not worth it. Well, that's all for today, guys. If you had a Philosopher's Stone, tell me, what kind of alchemical nonsense would you get up to? Let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss out on our future videos. Thanks for watching.